Before you listen to this BBC podcast, I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Stevie Middleton and I'm a BBC Commissioner for a load of sport podcasts. I'm lucky to do that at the BBC because I get to work with leading journalists, experienced pundits and the biggest sports stars. Together we bring you untold stories and fascinating insights straight from the players' mouths. But the best thing about doing this at the BBC is our unique access to the sporting world. What that means is that we can bring you podcasts that create a real connection to dedicated sports fans across the UK. So if you like this podcast, head over to BBC Sounds where you'll find plenty more.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Alasdair Lamont and this is the Scottish Football Podcast, kick-starting your week with all the news, views and analysis you need. As we record, it's the evening of Sunday the 5th of May and...
Lawrence, he goes for goal, deflected, good save, comes back out, Rangers back in the net! And John Souttar was the man who got in, the end of that rebound, and he headed it home to make it Rangers 4, Kilmarnock 1.
Rangers come from behind to beat 10-man Kilmarnock.
I've obviously underperformed, the group's obviously underperformed, and when you're in that hole, the next game becomes that wee bit harder and decisions seem to go against you. You start making individual mistakes and that's really what's led us to where we are today.
It's official, Livi are relegated. We'll have a chat about the ups and downs across the leagues and...
Where does this rank in your managerial career, John, in terms of achievements?
To get an invincible, it has to be the top.
Falkirk make it 36 games unbeaten and lift the League One title.
This is the Scottish Football Podcast.
Well, who better to join us to discuss that than Falkirk's Stephen McGinn. Stephen, have you recovered from the celebrations yesterday?
No, it's weird. Usually the trophy day is just a kind of celebration day with families, but it's a lot more subdued than the actual winning of the league. But with that going for the unbeaten season, it was mad, especially the last 10-15 minutes inside the stadium. It was like we needed a goal to win the league. So, yeah, just huge relief. And as I said, when that full-time whistle went, you felt like you were celebrating winning the league again.
Yeah, it was great stuff to see. And Falkirk getting back to closer to where they belong. And also joining us, Kevin Thomson, formerly of Hibs and Rangers. Kevin, thanks for coming on. I saw that... no sooner had Marvin Bartley left Queen of the South and your name was being linked with it. Is that something that would potentially interest you next season?
I think I get linked with every job, Al, but never get one. I think that must just be social media rumours then. But nah, it's obviously sad to see Big Marv lose his job. It's never nice to obviously see anyone lose a job. I know Marv, and I had him on the phone, obviously asking for different players' numbers, etc. when he first got the job and kind of insight into what we've done at Kelly. So it's been a tough season, and Stevie will tell you when things are going well, it's the best game in the world to be involved in. But when you're maybe at a club, when you're either a manager or a player and things are not going so particularly well, it's a tough environment to deal with. So, is that a diplomatic answer for you, Al?
That's a good one. Yeah, I'll settle for that. Yeah, well, plenty to discuss with both the guys. But before all that, let's quickly run through all the latest Scottish football news. Rangers are back to within 3 points of Premiership leaders Celtic after a 4-1 win over Kilmarnock. Philippe Clement says he hopes they can have a bit of fun at Celtic Park next weekend. That was in response to a similar comment from Brendan Rodgers after their win over Hearts yesterday. David Wotherspoon's confirmed he won't be playing for newly promoted Dundee United next season. The former St Johnstone midfielder joined Jim Goodwin's side in January. He posted on X that my journey with the Tangerines ends here. And the Hearts women's captain Georgia Hunter has sustained an ACL injury. She landed awkwardly when attempted to clear the ball during last Wednesday's match against Rangers, and the extent of the injury was confirmed today. Well, let's start our weekend look back with the Rangers Kilmarnock from Sunday afternoon. Kevin, I'll start with you because I know you were at the game, as was I, doing a commentary for BBC Radio Scotland. Rangers made heavy weather of it for a long period, but ultimately, I guess, at this stage of the season, it is just about getting the 3 points, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that has to be the positive spin, I suppose. They managed to go over the line. I thought Kilmarnock looked a threat. Listen, the big moment was the sending off and the penalty. It changed the momentum of the game, I thought. And obviously Derek then had to go to his bench and kind of change tactics. And I thought they were a real threat. I thought Watkins and Vassell to start with Armstrong off the right was causing problems on the counter attack. But as soon as they went to 10 men, I think it was inevitable, was always going to happen. And fair play to Rangers, they under British scrutiny, I think you could say, to be fair, there was a few voices heard, whether some were at the referee or some were at the players, but there's certainly plenty of groans at half time. But they've managed to come out in the second half and get their noses in front, and in the end, obviously quite comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, the first quarter of the game, to me, I mean, it was just so much going on. It was absolutely incredible, and obviously, you mentioned the red card that led to a Rangers penalty. Again, Will Dennis pulling off a really good save, and it wasn't until the last few seconds of the first half that Rangers finally got that equaliser. Second half was a bit more comfortable, but nonetheless, they're still probably not really at top form at this particular point in the season, are they?
I think there's there seems to be like a nervousness to try and get over the line. I think there's a big onus on the attacking players. I thought Cantwell huffed and puffed at times. I thought he was... Listen, you're playing against it's a unique position when you play for Rangers. When you receive the ball, you've got a wall of jerseys, whether they're blue jerseys or opposition ones, to try and thread their passes, to try and create something. And they probably have missed someone that's capable of taking people on. I think Cantwell needs a give and go. He needs that platform. I'm not so sure Dessers is the man to give him that. So I think they've struggled at times out to try and break teams down and to create the wee moments that sometimes just need imagination. And I think when you've got like a Ryan Kent, when they used to have him, that is more than capable of attracting 2 or 3 players to the ball, and he's so dangerous and he can create space for others. Plus he can go 1v1, he can take people on, he can take multiple players on and make things happen off of nothing. I'm not so sure Rangers quite have that in their armoury this year, so it's looked slightly different for them.
See on that note, Tomo, I was thinking watching the game, Kilmarnock are going to make that sub where they bring on a defensive player for an attacker. You thinking Falkirk Lamont right away should maybe be looking at taking Dujon Sterling off for maybe a McCausland or something to open up that wall? Because I totally understand why Sterling would play. Kilmarnock with 11 men, really physical team, as you say, a real threat on the break. I think he helps out Tavernier defensively when he plays there. But the minute it goes 10 for 10, would you like to see more of an attacking sub at that point from Rangers?
Nah, I agree, Stevie. We've kind of said that to the boys that were in the lounges. Where McCausland's probably the one player that is a wee bit off the cuff, and he's got obviously electric speed. His first thought is to attack. I just think it causes so much confusion. And listen, Kelly are a really good team. I think Derek McInnes takes a huge amount of credit. He's obviously in line to potentially win the Manager of the Year, and rightly so. Obviously playing Lewis Mayo as kind of right back rather than obviously centre back as well. You know what I mean? Just adding that wee bit extra bit of steel. So I certainly felt that, listen, the sending off changed the game, doesn't it? But I certainly think Rangers could have been a wee... When you think of John Lundstrom always sitting behind the ball and obviously being quite safe, there was certainly an impetus there to have another attacking player on the pitch.
It's just when he speaks about the wall there, I've been one of the walls countless times at Ibrox and Celtic Park. But yeah, when I'm watching the game and I'm thinking, imagining myself being a Kilmarnock player and Silva's going short for the ball, Cantwell's going short for the ball, Lundstrom's going short for the ball, Sterling can't go in behind, he's a defensive type player, Dessers is a target man, and I'm thinking, I'm okay here. And as a Kilmarnock player, I'm thinking, see if they get to this half time, there's going to be a lot of noise inside the stadium. If they can get to half time, the goal's huge from Silva. I think it's massive and kind of finishing the game as a contest second half. But I was just thinking, everyone's just come to the ball. Nobody's threatening that block of 2-4s they had.
Kelly, obviously, it wasn't their day ultimately. I mean, they had started the game so well, getting the goal and defending for their lives. Ultimately, of course, losing pretty emphatically, but it has been a brilliant season for them, and your former sides actually next weekend a fascinating game in Paisley as they go kind of head to head for fourth place, albeit Kelly are strong favourites to clinch that, aren't they? Yeah,
I mean, St Mirren I think probably fell away. They were very close with Kilmarnock. That was a huge day for them yesterday in Dundee. Massive result to bring European football back, and I think they're probably only one more win away from guaranteeing it. Obviously some of the fixtures Dundee have, so massive in that point of view. Yeah, just 2 brilliant seasons they've had, and I think Kilmarnock showed. They beat Celtic twice and they beat Rangers, and they've not been flukes. And watching today 11v11, you can see they've got a confidence, they've got a good arrogance about them, that they know they're a good side, good legs in the team, and they're a threat from they can score. So yeah, 2 good teams, and as I say, 2 really successful seasons so far.
And talking about confidence, it strikes me as doing Celtic Hearts yesterday, and although Hearts started that game well, but they found themselves 2 down pretty early on. But Celtic, once they got into their groove and got those early goals, they look in a really confident vein of form just at the moment, don't they? Just when it matters most.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big worries this season has been keeping your key players fit. Guys like McGregor, guys like Hatate, Carter Vickers. When they're all in the team and fully firing, they're a totally different side. The drop off to the bench players, no disrespect, but it's huge. They're irreplaceable for Celtic, and I think watching the highlights last night, one of the biggest cheers was Callum McGregor making that big recovery run, because
that was phenomenal. Yeah.
The last fixture, that obviously next week could be a bit of a league decider, the last fixture at Celtic Park, Callum McGregor ran the show. He obviously wasn't fully fit for the last game, so to show that speed, to show that he might be back to his full fitness, was a massive boost for Celtic.
Kevin, I mean, it really all does boil down to Saturday, doesn't it? How do you see it going?
Yeah, it might actually not even be enough, Al, if they go and win the game. But I said earlier, just when we were chatting, that the worst case for Rangers is they make Celtic have to win the title. I don't think anyone would accept them just giving them away. And obviously that lacklustre week that they had only a couple of weeks ago has obviously put them in a tricky position. So the trophy is Celtic's to lose now, really, whereas 2 or 3 weeks ago there was a good opportunity for it to be in Rangers' hands. So I don't know if there'll be another twist and a turn. I certainly think Celtic are hitting top gear. What I would say, if I was a betting man, I would bet on both teams to score, because I think both of them are very fragile at the back. I think if there was ever going to be a high scoring game, it could potentially be the Old Firm coming, because I think both are very vulnerable at the back, and the stakes are going to be that high that I think there'll be mistakes, there'll be tension, there'll be big moments within the game, and I can genuinely see, listen, it'll end up being a 0-0, won't it? But I can see there being lots of goals, Al, and whether there's going to be twists and turns, I don't know. I would have said 3 weeks ago that Rangers were more than capable of going there and winning, and then when they have that starting week that they had, and that's not being any disrespectful to Ross County or Dundee, but the week that they had was a difficult one for them, and then it's amazing how the complex changes when they have these weeks. So Celtic in top gear, Rangers kind of huffing and puffing. It's going to be intriguing one to see how it pans out.
Sure is. I'm sure we'll all chat more about that over the course of the next week. Let's turn our attention to the bottom of the table, and I think the inevitable of Livingston going down was finally confirmed. I mean, it's been a great run they've had, Stephen, in the top flight. Ultimately, it's just a season too far for them. Already, just looking at next season, it's going to be tough for them to think about coming straight back up, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure that's the ambition. That'll be the chat amongst the Livingston ranks. Davy Martindale, if he's staying on as a manager, that'll be the intention, to get the club back to the Premier League. But I think it's almost the end of an era in terms of a lot of players that have been there for a long time. I think there'll be big changes, and it'll be a full new team. We speak about, at Falkirk, taking that momentum into next year, and everyone knows their jobs. One of the hardest bits will be gelling a new team. There'll be a lot of new players, and as we all know, the Championship's unforgiving, so they need to be ready for what it is.
I'll come on to the Championship and Falkirk's ambitions in that league next season, but just before we do that, there's still another couple of teams looking to try and avoid joining them, Ross County and St Johnstone. Differing results for them at the weekend, and at the moment it looks like St Johnstone are the ones who are really toiling to get out of that playoff position. Would you expect them to be able to turn that around, Kevin, or do you see them being involved in the playoff?
I'd say it goes back to kind of what I was talking about Rangers and Celtic. I think when St Johnstone went to Easter Road and beat Hibs, you think that Craig Levein might just do what he does on the tin and keep St Johnstone up, and then they have a couple poor results, and obviously Hibs then go and obviously beat them when there's less pressure on, and then Hibs then slip up to Ross County, a brilliant result. And I think I actually heard him, I think he's a class act, Don Kevy. I think he's went in there and done a really good job, and he speaks really well, presents himself really well. And he's turned a difficult side into quite an exciting side, I think. The way they play, we've always got attacking players on the pitch. I think they're well organised, they're a threat. And if I was a betting man, just with the lack of goals that St Johnstone have had, I would bet that it might be St Johnstone. But listen, I'm not a betting man, I'm not very good at it. So if any St Johnstone fans or Ross County fans are listening, then I genuinely cannot call it, because I think the games are so difficult and they're going to be so flip of the coin type games that it genuinely could go anywhere.
Yeah, no, and even once you get to the playoffs, it's trying to call them is almost impossible. But let's talk about the Championship then. Let me get an outsider's view first of all, before I get the inside view from Stephen. But Kevin, let's just put Falkirk's achievement this season in a bit of context, and also how do you think they will fare? Obviously, there will be additions, as Stephen touches on, over the course of the summer. You would fancy them to put on a pretty good show next season, would you not, Kevin?
No, definitely. Listen, first and foremost, and obviously I've actually played with all the McGinns. I've been lucky enough to play with them all. Stevie obviously up at Dundee, Paul up at Dundee, and obviously John at Hibs. So, brilliant boys, come from great people, and it's always great to see them doing well. But like, taking Falkirk as a club, sleeping giant really, and being in the Championship is a minimum for a club like Falkirk. Really well supported, big fan base, and to go through the season, undefeated. Listen, I was there, League 2, obviously, a league below, and just how difficult it is to try and put a team on a pitch and to get your best players and to, play the brand of football that Falkirk have played. I think John McGinn used to be under 18s coach at Hearts when I was at Hibs, and he used to shout and ball at the side of the pitch, and his teams were always aggressive and banged it long, and he's kind of like, when you think he's Rafe team and now he's Falkirk team, he's almost like he's rebirthed himself really, and his teams are really good to watch. He gets great plaudits for the players. So listen, I cannot give them enough praise out, to be fair, and they're rightly probably in the Championship. They're probably a sleeping giant to potentially get to the Premier League, but like Stevie said there just earlier, the Championship is so unforgiving. So John will need to get his recruitment right. He'll need to make sure that the boys have got that camaraderie, togetherness. Stephen talks about that momentum, which will be really important for them. And I think if you can get off to a good start with the opportunity to have 4 places, obviously with the playoffs, it's a great opportunity for them to try and bounce straight back up to the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, I know you'll probably not be putting your neck on the line as such, Stephen, but I mean, you look at what Airdrie have done this season, then if you can take that momentum into the next campaign, it's not beyond you, is it?
No, I mean, that's first and foremost, you get into a division next year, there isn't maybe a Dundee United, there isn't a Kilmarnock, there's not some of the big clubs that have been in it where you think they'll just always have enough to get it over the line, so it's winnable for someone. If you take that momentum, the manager, I don't think he's going to. I think most of the boys are going to be there. I think there's only going to be 2 or 3 signings. There's a lot of boys at a good age, and a lot of boys that been good Championship players. Yeah. But I mean, it's important not to play down Falkirk in the Championship just because it's been in League 1 for 5 years. I mean, I was in the Championship in St Mirren when Peter Houston lost his job because he wasn't getting promoted that season in the Championship. I mean, being a Falkirk player in the Championship, the demand is to get to the Premier League. So whether they get a year's grace next year, I'm not sure. But before long, the fans will be demanding, the board will be demanding the players to be challenging for the Premier League.
Let's just dip down a couple of divisions. You mentioned League 2, Kevin, and a few months ago, Ian McCall took over at Clyde, and they looked to be gone. They looked to be certainly heading for that playoff at the bottom of the table. He's managed to keep them in League 2 after a real revival. It has been some turnaround for them, hasn't it?
Yeah, brilliant. And he's probably one of the few that could do it, Al, to be fair to him. Plenty of experience, and I think he inherited a decent group, manipulated it obviously in January, but brilliant escape for them. And it's a club that, without doing disservice to anyone else or any other club, but it's a club that you would expect to be a wee bit further up the leagues, and you hope that they can build themselves back up and try and move up the way rather than obviously looking down the way. But I want to give a special mention to Bonnyrigg, Gal, because obviously I went there on Saturday to watch one of the young players that have come through my academy. We've had him since he was 13, a boy called Owen Wardle, and he come on yesterday. I know Callum quite well, he stays in the kind of same area as me, so I'd asked for a wee sneak preview to see if he could get on the pitch, if he was going to get on the pitch, because I didn't want to give him a 20 quid if he wasn't going to get on. I was being miserable, but I've obviously managed to get along, and they had obviously a brilliant result as well. So out of the woods as such, League 2 obviously next year, a brilliant community club, and the lad ended up coming on and scoring on his senior debut, which was quite a special day for us. So
great stuff.
So listen, I love the lower leagues. It's I think when you've potentially played in the Premier League and you've never really experienced it, but I have a lot of admiration to these boys that do part-time and the hard work and the grit that goes into it.
No, absolutely. Stephen, I just quite like your insight on some of the playoffs, to try and join Falkirk in the Championship. It's Alloa against Accies in one semi-final, and then Montrose against Inverness Cally Thistle in the other. Would you stick your neck out and say who's going to come out on top out of that 4?
I think Hamilton have had a good season. Most seasons, they'd be right up there in terms of contesting it. And like, from our point of view, as I say, we went unbeaten. We've beat them in head-to-head games, which has really been the difference in terms of the title race. So I think they've been a really worthy second place, and I fancy them to beat Alloa. And I think Montrose, for the last few years, I mean, they were Falkirk's bogey team over the last few years. I think they've lost a little bit of physicality, a little bit of legs in midfield, and I think Inverness will have too much for them. And in the final, I'll get to that when the final comes, but I think it'll be an Accies versus Inverness final.
Yeah, that's a fair shout. Well, listen, we'll touch on some of the other lower league playoffs later in the week. Thursday is usually our lower league podcast, so we'll turn our attention to some of those. Then I just want to run through some of the results in the SWPL before we finish, and also point ahead to our coverage of a massive game in the SWPL on Monday. It's Rangers against Celtic. Could well be a title decider in itself. We'll have all the SWPL highlights from 7 o'clock on the BBC Scotland channel. The other results from Sunday: Hearts 3, Partick Thistle 2, Glasgow City 2, Hibs 2, Spartans 0, Dundee United 0, Montrose 1, Motherwell 1, and Hamilton Accies 3, Aberdeen 3. That is all we've got time for today, though. Thanks very much to the guys, Stephen and Kevin, for their time, and time to wrap things up. But remember, we publish new episodes every weekday, so you can get your daily dose of Scottish football bright and early. Thanks for joining us.
The Scotland Rugby Podcast is now available every Tuesday. Join me, Andy Burke, and Tom English. Just head to BBC Sounds and subscribe to the Scotland Rugby Podcast.
It's just seismic stuff.
There's bucket hats as well.
Oh, really? Yeah. Is this a rugby podcast or is this a fashion podcast?
Why can't it be a bit of both?
Rugby. Let's get on to rugby.
There's a lot to be excited about.
Today's guest, John McGuigan.
Clubs are at an absolute bedrock of everything Scottish rugby's about.
The Rugby Sports Sound Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
You cannot help but be so excited.
It's going to be the centre of the rugby universe.
BBC Sounds.